Good afternoon and greetings, all of my friends in the Akpaden, Nigeria stake. Hope you're enjoying this BYU pathway activity, and I feel so honored to be part of it. I wish I were there in person to enjoy it with you, to engage and interact with you personally. But I hope that this virtual presentation is still helpful and meaningful. I hope it's inspiring and engaging and motivating. I've really enjoyed putting some thoughts together, and hope it's of benefit to you. I'm also a graduate of BYU. Very grateful and proud of my BYU education. It's opened a lot of doors for me, and I am so impressed with all of you for the sacrifices that you're making to get a BYU education. I know that doors will open for you as well, and I hope that you can feel the Lord's help as you pursue your education. I took a couple minutes to watch Matt Downs' presentation that he shared during your last activity in March. And he made a suggestion that I would like to make as well. If you've got a pen and paper handy, I'd love for you to jot down any thoughts that you have during the presentation. They might be unrelated to what I actually say. And then I'm also going to ask some questions later on in the presentation. And feel free to write down any answers that come to mind with those questions. Might even be good to discuss as a group, have a brainstorming session. So Matt touched on a couple of things that I just wanted to summarize. He talked about the global job market, right, and the gig economy and the importance of developing specific skill sets to prepare to get a job in the global job market, right, or the gig economy. He also talked about how some people don't love school, don't love the formal education process. To be quite honest, I did not love the formal education process. I kind of struggled with many parts of education, right? He talked about some of the differences or the different paths that you can go, either as an employee working for a company, or as somebody who's self-employed, where you start your own company and maybe employ other people. And the BYU Pathway program does a fantastic job of preparing students for this global job market, right? And many courses are geared towards getting a job, right, with an established company. I actually want to focus on the other career path, the other option, which is starting your own business and becoming an employer, right? Creating jobs for other people. I love business. I'm a business owner myself, and I love how business can solve problems, right? And it can create jobs, and it can create meaning and impact in people's lives. And I love how the profit motive of business can drive innovation. It can motivate people to act and to solve problems and to be creative, right? And to make life better for people, right? And I wanted to introduce the topic as well. Maybe you already have been discussing it, but I feel like it ties in really well with this message. And the topic is refining our minds to identify and participate in self-reliance activities. So being an employee for a company is one way to be self-reliant. Starting a business, right, and creating jobs is another way to be self-reliant and to help others become self-reliant. A couple years ago, I read a book that was very eye-opening for me, and I actually wanted to use it as a framework for this presentation. The book is called The Prosperity Paradox, and it completely changed my perspective on business, on impact in the world, on creating prosperity, and how that is achieved in somebody's life, or for a nation or country. I'm going to share some slides, so give me 1 second while I share my screen here. Okay, I think everybody can see that now. So this book has 3 authors. The main author is Clayton Christensen. He is one of the brightest business minds who has ever lived. He passed away a couple years ago, but wrote several books on business and problem solving and business strategy. He was a professor at Harvard Business School. He was also a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and just a fantastic human being. His co-authors were Ifosa Ojomo and Karen Dillon. Ifosa Ojomo is actually a native Nigerian, and his career is actually focused on implementing the principles from this book in Africa, right, and throughout the world. And there's 3 points that I wanted to chat about that this book highlights. Right, the first thesis of the book is prosperity is created through market-creating innovations, not aid or infrastructure alone. Now, this is an interesting thought, because billions of dollars have been spent by countries, in the form of foreign aid to try to, create infrastructure and help, alleviate poverty, and really there hasn't been any noticeable change with all of that money that has been spent, right? And so his argument, and he has some examples in the book that highlight this that we'll talk about, but market creating innovations is actually what creates prosperity. Then second, these innovations make products and services affordable and accessible to many more people, right? So you're creating new markets, which kind of leads into the third thesis. Economic growth comes from transforming non-consumers into consumers, right? So those non-consumers becoming consumers create entirely new markets, right, that didn't exist before. So the question is, what is a market creating innovation, right? So he defines it as anything that simplifies and reduces the cost of products or services, right? And a market creating innovation targets non-consumers, those with no access, right, and turns them into new customers, creating entirely new markets by serving people previously excluded, which generates both profit and development. Wanted to share 3 stories highlighted in the book that illustrate these principles of how market creating innovation changed entire economies, right, and created prosperity in the countries where these companies were founded. All right, the first is Henry Ford in the United States. Second is Mo Ibrahim in Africa, and Debbie Shetty in India. So I wanted to go through each one of these, and then I've got a couple others that are not in the book that I've just observed that I feel are implementing these same principles and having similar effects. But Henry Ford targeted non-consumers, right? His goal was to make the automobile affordable for the average American, right? So in his time, only the really wealthy could afford automobiles, right? An automobile cost $2,000 to $3,000, which was way more money than most people had back then, right? So he had a goal to sell a car for under $1,000, right? So his first car, the Model T, sold for $865, right? And because of that lower cost, so many people were able to buy cars, right? So he in the first 20 years he sold 15 million cars, right? And he developed an assembly line process in manufacturing that reduced the cost even more, right? So after a couple of years, he was selling the Model T, the first car, for $260. That's an amazing difference, right? $260 versus $2,000 to $3,000, right? That's a tenth of the cost, and he was able to accomplish that by innovation, right? By the efficiencies that he gained in his manufacturing process, right? Another really interesting thing that he did was he improved labor conditions for his employees. So he raised their wages, almost doubling their wages, right? Which was unheard of in that industrial time. But what that did was, one, it allowed him to keep his employees for longer, right? So his valuable employees who knew his process as well, they wanted to stay with the company because they got paid really well, right? And second, it turned them into consumers, right? Now they were making enough money where they could afford to buy a car. So all of a sudden his employees became his customers, right? And he also introduced the 5-day work week and the 8-hour work day, which is still in place in the United States and is the basis for much of the labor laws here in the United States. And I think one of the coolest things, though, about the Henry Ford story is because of that new market that he created, targeting non-consumers, right, making the car affordable for so many more people. That market actually created entirely new markets, right? So with more cars, there needed to be more roads, right? So construction companies, started forming that could lay roads, right? Creating more jobs, right? An entirely new market. And with more cars and more roads, more people were driving, right? And people need gas, to put in their cars so they can keep driving, right? So gas stations started popping up all over the country. And then car dealerships, right? Those didn't exist before. Now, people could go to a car dealership and buy a car anywhere in the country, right? And then cars break down, right, and need to be repaired. So repair shops started forming, and creating even more jobs. Fast food restaurants, right? As people are driving on the roads over long distances, they get hungry. They needed a place to eat. So fast food restaurants started popping up all over roads, all over the country, right? So McDonald's, which is now worldwide, McDonald's started because of this growing demand for cars and roads and more people driving, right? In-N-Out Burger, which is another big restaurant chain in the United States. There are several multi-billion-dollar restaurant chains that came as a result of this car market expanding and creating additional markets. So you can see this virtual cycle of innovation leading to entirely new markets and creating more jobs, which improve people's incomes and make them consumers where before they were non-consumers, right? And so after years and years of innovation and job creation and improvement, a whole new economy arises, right? With hundreds of new markets and thousands and tens of thousands, millions of new jobs over time. right? And so prosperity, the prosperity of everyone, just expands, right? And what's interesting too is in Henry Ford's time, the United States was not a wealthy country, right? The United States started off as a poor country. And it wasn't until Henry Ford and John D. Rockefeller and several other innovators created new markets, right? That the U.S. started becoming more prosperous, and several other countries have followed similar paths. South Korea, Singapore, right? The path towards prosperity is through market creating innovations. Right? Mo Ibrahim. So he has a very interesting story as well. Some of you may recognize the name Celtel, right? Mo Ibrahim founded the company Celtel. And what's interesting about this story is when he started the company, he tried to raise money from investors, and nobody was interested in investing, right? Because they didn't believe in his idea, right? They didn't see his vision. But he saw a huge non-consumer opportunity, right? He saw millions of Africans who needed to communicate but had no access, right? They didn't have cell phones, and he saw a huge opportunity, for Africans to be able to communicate and also participate in the economy, right? And that wasn't happening, right? But nobody else believed in that vision, so he started it anyway. He was really scrappy and creative in how he financed, the company. But he built the infrastructure from scratch, right? So he constructed his own towers, his own supply chains across 14 African countries. And created a lot of jobs in the meantime, right? He needed people to build those towers and to build the logistics that needed to be in place. And then he had a very innovative way to offer this service to Africans. So he created the prepaid model, right? And he didn't do credit checks, and he didn't do contracts. And you didn't have to have a bank account in order to get a phone, right? You could buy prepaid airtime, right? That was more appropriate for the irregular cash flows of the low-income consumers, right? Or low-income users. And Celtel grew to 24 million subscribers and was eventually purchased by a big private equity company in 2005 for $3.4 billion with a B. And nobody saw that before Mo did, right? But Celtel enabled financial access for millions without traditional banks through mobile money, right? And so all these people with cell phones could now access mobile money, right? They could now participate in the formal economy. They could buy goods and services. They could sell goods and services, right? So, this cell phone market that Mo created with Celtel led to the creation of entirely new markets, right? The mobile money market, and allowed for the economy to grow and for jobs to be created. The third example from the book that I wanted to share is about Dr. Devi Shetty. So he's a heart surgeon in India, and he basically created a program in an Indian hospital where they could perform many, many more heart surgeries at a fraction of the cost, right? So he designed a system where surgeons performed procedures daily, right? So they could spread their costs over more surgeries, right? And he reduced the cost of surgery by 90%, right? And he made it so that wealthier patients paid for they paid full price for their surgery, but the poorest people could actually receive their surgery at little or no cost, right? But the hospital was still profitable because it was still charging the wealthier, patients full price, right? But because they were able to do a lot more heart surgeries, their surgeons got better, they got quicker, they got more efficient, right? And um, so it reduced the cost to perform these surgeries, right? And they adapted, really lean workflows and specialization for manufacturing. So they basically used some of the same, principles and practices that Henry Ford used, and they applied it in a hospital setting and drove the cost of heart surgery way down, right? And so what happened as a result? Millions of Indians who could never afford a heart surgery became patients, right? So they created a humongous market by targeting non-consumers and making heart surgery affordable for many, many more people, right? So you see the trend here, right? In fact, the shared lesson from all of these, right, is that each one of these entrepreneurs saw what others did not see, right? That the absence of a market is not the absence of need, but it's the absence of the right solution, right? And then they also discovered that by designing for non-consumers, they created entirely new markets, right? And generated sustainable profits and produced development outcomes that foreign aid and conventional business both fail to achieve, right? So all of them made products and services affordable for many, many, many more people that could not afford those products or services beforehand, thus creating entirely new markets, expanding markets to be humongous markets, right? And what they discovered is, a little bit of profit from a lot more people is a lot more profit, right? And it's so interesting how this process works. So what does that mean for entrepreneurs? What does that mean for you as you think about this principle and how it might apply for you? So first, look for non-consumers, right? The biggest markets are often invisible. They're people who currently have no access. Find them and design for them. And that accessibility can unlock prosperity. If you can make basic goods and services affordable to even the poorest of the poor, you've just created the biggest market you could ever create, right? And you will unlock prosperity. Right? Two, design for simplicity and affordability. So strip out the complexity, lower the cost structure, make it accessible to people others have written off or discounted or ignored, right? That's exactly what Henry Ford did, right? He lowered the cost of manufacturing automobiles so that they could be accessible to average income Americans. Third, build business models around scale, right? High volume at low margin can generate more profit. We just talked about that. And more impact, right? So if you have a small market where you're just serving the elite, there's not a lot of profit there. If you have a really big market that services everybody, it's a lot more profit. Four, expect to build the ecosystem too. Market creating innovations often require building the infrastructure, supply chain, and institutions around it. So remember Ford, right? So Ford just made cars affordable to everybody, right? But there's no roads for people to drive on. Okay, well, so to create more demand, he built more roads. He paid for more roads to be built, right? And with more roads and more automobiles, right, laws had to be put in place to protect people on the roads, right? And so governments and institutions kind of formed around these innovations, right? And cars need parts, right? And so companies were created that supplied parts to the Ford Motor Company, right? So each new market that is created pulls in resources that it needs to continue to sustain itself. And when it pulls those resources in, it creates new markets, right? And new companies form, and new jobs are created, and more people become prosperous. It's a beautiful cycle. So I wanted to share a couple of, I think I need to put this in slideshow mode. There we go. I wanted to share a couple of examples that aren't in the book of people who I believe have implemented these principles successfully and created a lot of prosperity. So the first one, this is Charles Mulley. He has an amazing story. I would love to meet him in person. He was born in Kenya. When he was 6 years old, his family abandoned him, and he spent his childhood and adolescence begging for food on the streets in the slums of Nairobi, Kenya. And miraculously was able to find a job outside of the capital, and saved his money and bought a car that he used to transport people, and people loved riding with him because he'd turn on the radio and they'd listen to music. And anyway, he started picking up more people, right? More customers, driving them places, and eventually bought another vehicle and another vehicle, and grew his transportation company, Mullyways, into a very big multi-million-dollar business in Kenya. And he eventually got into real estate, and he got into some other business ventures. One business opportunity led to another business opportunity, and he became very, very successful. And one day decided that he wanted to make more of an impact in the world. And so he sold all of his businesses, and he started basically a family orphanage. And he would go into the slums of Nairobi, Kenya, and he would take abandoned children, and he'd bring them back to his home and adopt them as his own. And eventually they had too many children to fit in their house, and so they bought a bigger place, further out in the country. And they found that they needed to feed all of these people that they were rescuing, right? And so he created a farm, that grew crops, and they dug a well, so that they could have water to drink, and also to, for their crops and their animals, and built this farm into a humongous business enterprise. I think it's over 500 acres. They have fish farming, they have agriculture, they have so much agriculture that they've created a mini climate where the farm is, where before it was just a barren desert. It now flourishes because of the water and the little microclimate that they've created there. And he and his wife in this picture have rescued over 13,000 orphan kids, and offered them jobs on the farm, and helped them get education, right, and help them become prosperous. And I love his story, and he's still living and still operating this farm, and it's thriving, right? And he's prospering, and the people that he's providing jobs for and rescuing are also prospering. Just a fantastic story. this is him with some of their orphan children that they've adopted. This guy's name is Looney Libis. He's an American entrepreneur. He founded several technology startup companies in the 1990s and early 2000s. Anyway, after his fifth startup, he decided he didn't want to do another tech company. He wanted to do something more impactful. So he started a business accelerator program for impactful companies that wanted to make a difference, but also make a profit, right? And anyway, so he had several rounds of this business accelerator course, and several of the companies came from Africa, right? And he noticed that that these African companies had really profitable operations and really great business opportunities, but they lacked capital to grow. And so he started an investment fund that focused on African food and agriculture businesses. And he's done amazing work. So he has about 30 companies that are part of this investment portfolio, and they're all in Africa, in several different countries. And he started this in 2016, so about 10 years ago. And this portfolio of companies, this group of companies, did about $1 million in revenue during that time, or that first year in 2016. And last year they did about $55 million in revenue, right? So they've grown tremendously in 10 years. And all Looney has done is invested in trucks and cell phones, right? And what he's recognized is that these food and agriculture businesses, you know, the smallholder farmers in Africa have a really hard time getting their produce to market, right? And so he saw that a lot of food was being wasted. Like 40 to 50% of food was wasted before it even got to the market, right? So he just helped these companies, you know, get their food from the smallholder farmers to the market faster, so that that less food was wasted. So now they only have about 3 to 4% of food that is wasted, and they've been able to double, triple, even quadruple the incomes of the smallholder farmers that they're buying their produce from, right, and bringing to the market. And so he's not only created you know, jobs, but he's also you know, increasing the income of the people who have those jobs, right, and eliminating waste. So a result of that is when you have a more efficient operation and less waste, the cost of that product goes down, right? And so now he's able to sell food in the markets for much less because he's much more efficient, right? And his companies are much more efficient. And so they were able to sell to a lot more people because they've reduced the cost of food for them. And you know, I've listened to several podcasts with him, and he says that there is so much opportunity, so much more opportunity. He's not even scratching the surface of the opportunity and the potential there in Africa. He said there's 100 times, maybe even 1,000 times, you know, growth that they could experience and still, you know, still have room to grow. And you know, very simple things. He's not doing anything really difficult, right? He's providing trucks and cell phones, and that alone is enough of an innovation to completely change that market and create additional markets from increased demand. Okay, I'm going to embarrass him. little bit. This next picture is of Victor, Elder Asenatuk. So I met Victor a couple months ago, and Victor is an example of someone who is implementing these prosperity paradox principles. So Victor, if you don't know, has a chicken farm, a poultry farm, Nitux Farms, and he's in a picture right here with the owner of Mac Diasa BSF Farm. So what Victor's trying to do right now, and we're working on this together, but we're trying to reduce the cost of chicken feed so that the cost of chickens can become lower and more people can afford to buy chicken, right? And there's an amazing bug called the black soldier fly that I'm convinced is the solution to this problem, right? And Victor can tell you more about the black soldier fly larva and how it can reduce the cost of chicken feed. But this is an example of a market creating innovation, right? So one of the problems with chicken in Nigeria and other African countries is that it's really hard to operate a profitable poultry business because the cost of chicken feed is so high, right? So if Victor is successful in reducing the cost of chicken feed, he can still make a profit and reduce the price of his chickens and grow his market, right? Because more people will buy chickens from him because he can sell it for a lower price, right? So we're looking at some ideas for how to start a black soldier fly farm, that's joined with his poultry farm, so that we can reduce the cost of chicken feed. And what's interesting too is not only will the poultry market expand, right, but the black soldier fly larva, they produce a very nutrient rich organic fertilizer that can also be sold, right? So Victor could actually be creating a new market, right, for nutrient-rich organic fertilizer that he could then sell, right, and increase the crop yields, of farmers in the community, right? And so that one innovation can actually lead to more innovations, more jobs being created, more markets being created, right? And as Victor's poultry business grows, he's going to eventually need to buy some transportation, some tricycles or some trucks, right? Which will help build the boost the economy, and he's going to need to hire somebody to drive the trucks and make the deliveries, right? And so he's going to create some jobs and allow others to become prosperous. Just a beautiful virtuous cycle, and many opportunities and doors that open when you focus on market creating innovations. Sorry to embarrass you, Victor. So, questions I want to ask you, right? And you can take some time to write answers to these questions. I'm happy to share these slides with you, in case you want to see these questions or see any of the information later on. But the questions I want to ask you to think about and to apply personally, and to maybe get the gears going for maybe starting your own business that implements the market creating innovations that the principles that we just discussed here. But what non-consumption do you see around you? Where do you see struggle in your community? Because where there is struggle, there is business opportunity, right? And where there is non-consumption, there is business opportunity. Another question: What products or services do you see being consumed only by the elite few? How could those products or services be simplified or made more affordable? If you can answer those questions, you've just created a business, right? If you can figure out an innovative way to make those products more simple, more affordable, you just created a business opportunity. Another question, what markets exist in other countries or communities that should exist in yours? What can you do about it? So give those questions some thought, write your answers down, discuss amongst the group, get some ideas from other people. When you put many minds together, you can often come out with some great ideas. So this is Clark Gilbert. He was just called as an apostle a couple months ago. And he was the former president of BYU Pathway Worldwide. You've probably seen some videos of him or speeches by him. He is an example of someone who is implementing market creating innovation, right? So when I was a student at BYU was just a physical location, right? There was a location in Utah, there was a location in Idaho, and there was a location in Hawaii, right? And so only students who could be there in person at those schools could receive an education. Clark Gilbert helped to create the BYU Pathway Worldwide program, right? Where he made the same BYU education that I received available to anyone in the world, right? And because he was able to, and it wasn't just Elder Gilbert, right? There were many other people involved who helped him, but they were successful in implementing technology and driving the cost of education and the delivery of education way down, right? And so they made online education affordable to many, many, many more people, right? And now I think there's like 80,000 BYU Pathway Worldwide students around the world who before would not have been able to get an education, right? And I believe that hundreds of thousands of more people in the future will be able to receive quality education for a fraction of the cost as before, because of these market creating innovations that Elder Gilbert and the church have implemented to create the BYU Pathway Worldwide program. And it's amazing, and it's beautiful, and it's blessing lives, and it's creating prosperity in markets that have not been prosperous, right? And I love that. And I wanted to share a quote by Elder Gilbert from his first General Conference address. He said, while serving as the president of BYU Pathway Worldwide, I remember sitting in a large devotional in Lima, Peru, where Elder Carlos A. Godoy was the speaker. As he looked out over the congregation, he seemed overwhelmed, observing so many faithful first-generation university students. Perhaps reflecting on his own path through such difficult circumstances, Elder Godoy stated emotionally, "The Lord will help you more than you can help yourself. So involve the Lord in this process." So I want to invite each of you to follow Elder Gilbert's counsel there and involve the Lord in your education and involve the Lord in your career efforts, right? Your career endeavors. The Lord knows you, and he loves you, and he wants you to be prosperous, right? And he knows how to help you do that, right? And if you involve him, doors will open, right? And you'll experience miracles in your life. And I personally have experienced miracles in my career, I've seen the Lord's hand guiding me, uh, preserving me, um, helping me to do things I couldn't otherwise have done without his help. And I know he'll do the same for each of you. And maybe this is a good career path for you. Maybe it's not. Maybe you still want to get a remote job for a company. But if you see an opportunity to create a business, right, to come up with a market creating innovation um, that can allow you to build a business and create jobs and create markets in your community, that's awesome. Um, I would love to see that path pursued by more people, right? And I feel the opportunity is there, and um, it oftentimes we think the employment route, getting a job with a traditional company is the best route. Sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes we're missing a better opportunity to create jobs ourselves, right? And there's no reason that Nigeria or Ghana or Kenya or any other country uh, can't be prosperous, can't create enough jobs right there where people can prosper right there in those communities, right? Maybe the answer is to go to a different country, right, and create a business there. Maybe that's the opportunity, or to get a job there. But maybe it's to create something right there where you are, right there where you're planted. I wanted to share one more quote by Elder Gilbert from this talk that I love. He said, as former BYU President Rex E. Lee quoted to his students, "We have all drunk from wells we did not dig and warmed ourselves by fires we did not build." He then called on his students to give back and replenish the educational wells that earlier pioneers had built. I have drunk out of wells that I did not dig. I fully recognize that, and I'm grateful for the sacrifices that entrepreneurs and pioneers in my country have made so that I could have the opportunities and the access to resources that I have now. And you, right now, by being part of the BYU Pathway program, you are digging wells that your children and grandchildren will drink from, right? And you have a lot of uphill battles, and it's hard to dig a well, and it's hard to dig a well that you don't know if there's even water where you're digging, right? But I know that you are digging those wells for your children, your grandchildren. You are laying foundations for future generations and for yourselves, right? And so I want to encourage you to keep going there. And I wanted to share just a final question and then a scripture. So what wells are you digging that your children and grandchildren will drink from? It's a question I want you to think about. And then I want to just end by reading a scripture in Doctrine and Covenants that I think is very relevant to you and to anybody who is digging a well, right, or laying a foundation. And this is the Lord's words to the early saints of the church who were trying to dig a well, right? They were trying to establish the church, and it was really hard. And they had a lot of opposition. And the church was really small, and it didn't have very many resources, right? And I think all of us can relate at some point, right? Because we all start out, maybe with few resources, and when we try to to establish our life, we experience a lot of opposition. So this is the Lord's words to the early saints, and I feel that these are his words to you and to all of us who are trying to dig wells and do good things in the world and provide for ourselves and be self-reliant. He says, wherefore be not weary in well-doing, for you're laying the foundation of a great work. And out of small things proceedeth that which is great. Behold, the Lord requireth the heart and a willing mind, and the willing and obedient shall eat the good of the land of Zion in these last days. And I feel that you all are laying a great foundation by being part of the BYU Pathway program. And I feel like anybody, any entrepreneur, any innovator is also laying the foundation of a great work. And out of small things proceeded that which is great. The best things always start small. So if you feel like, oh, I don't have enough resources, or I don't have what it takes, or my resources are too small, that's the best way to start, right? And the Lord can take what you have and he can magnify it and he can make it great. I know that to be true. I've seen that in my own life. And I would love to help any of you who are interested in pursuing a path of innovation and entrepreneurship. I know that that if you have a good idea, that we could find help for you, find access to capital, find resources to help you make it happen, to help you dig that well. So please feel free to reach out to me. And I heard Matt Downs say the same thing in his presentation, right? He's an investor. And as you said, if you have good ideas, bring them to me. I'd love to take a look at them, right? But I hope this presentation has been helpful. I hope these thoughts have tied together. It's hard to know when there's not two-way engagement, if things are connecting. So I hope this has been helpful and relevant. And if there's anything you want to drill down on, feel free to engage with me via email. Victor has my contact information. But would love to connect with each of you or anybody who's interested. But wish you all the best. And I know that good things are in store for you, for each of you. The Lord's aware of the sacrifices you're making. He's aware of your needs. And he has great things in store for you. And there is every reason to hope and to feel optimistic and to feel happy. I know the Lord is in this with each of us. And I share that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.